long before the first cities rose beside rivers, before roads crossed continents, and before the night sky was softened by the glow of millions of electric lights. There was a different earth beneath the same stars. It was colder, quieter, and in many places astonishingly open. Great sheets of ice occupied enormous portions of the northern continents. Mountains were wrapped in glaciers, and the sea had withdrawn from coastlines we know today, exposing plains that would eventually disappear beneath the waves. Across these cold lands moved animals so large that their silhouettes seem almost impossible to us now. Woolly mammoths with sweeping tusks, woolly rhinoceroses with thick coats, enormous deer with antlers like branches of small trees, herds of bison, wild horses, reindeer, musk oxen, and predators that followed them across the seasons. Yet this was not simply a frozen wasteland. The Ice Age was a living world, shaped by wind and sunlight, rivers and snow, grass and migration, fire and memory. It changed slowly enough that generations could live within it without ever seeing the whole transformation. Yet, over thousands of years, it could become almost unrecognizable. Tonight, we are going to travel into that vanished world gently, without rushing through dates or turning the past into a list of facts. We will move like the wind across an ancient plain, slowly crossing glaciers, grasslands, caves, forests, rivers, and coastlines that no longer exist, listening to the quiet story of a planet that was never as still as it looked. Imagine the earth from above, far beyond the clouds, turning quietly beneath a pale winter sun. The northern half of the planet looks unfamiliar. Vast areas of North America and northern Europe are covered by ice, their surfaces stretching across thousands of kilometers in broad fields of white and blue. Mountain glaciers descend through valleys, joining larger ice masses and slowly grinding their way over stone. Beyond the ice, a broad belt of cold grassland reaches across Eurasia and into parts of North America. It is a landscape of low vegetation, open horizons, scattered shrubs, frozen rivers, and distant mountains. The air is dry. Winds move across the ground carrying dust and tiny grains of snow. There are no roads, no fences, no towers, no aircraft crossing the sky. The horizon belongs entirely to the land. In the distance, a herd of mammoths moves almost imperceptibly, each animal becoming a small dark shape against the pale grass. They are not wandering randomly. Their movement is connected to food, water, temperature, seasonal rhythms, and generations of memory. A calf stays close to an adult. The older animals seem to know the terrain. Somewhere beyond the next ridge, a river has not yet frozen completely, and along its banks there may still be grasses exposed beneath the snow. The herd continues toward it, slowly, patiently, as if the entire landscape were part of a familiar map held in their bodies. The world that we call the Ice Age was not one single period of permanent freezing. It was a long sequence of colder and warmer phases, with glaciers expanding and retreating many times. The most recent Ice Age, more precisely the Pleistocene glacial period, began roughly 2.6 million years ago and ended around 11,700 years ago. Although colder conditions did not simply appear at the beginning and disappear at the end. Earth's climate moved through cycles, influenced by subtle changes in the planet's orbit, its axial tilt, the orientation of its rotation, the chemistry of the atmosphere, ocean circulation, vegetation, snow cover, and the reflective power of ice. These forces interacted in ways that could amplify small changes. A little more snow could survive through a summer. More surviving snow could create more ice. More ice could reflect more sunlight. Colder conditions could then encourage still more snow to remain. The opposite could happen during warming phases. This is one reason the Ice Age world was never fixed. Glaciers advanced, paused, retreated, and advanced again. Forests expanded into open country and later disappeared. Animals changed their ranges. Rivers moved. Lakes appeared and vanished. The planet was constantly adjusting to a climate that moved through rhythms much slower than human lives. If you could stand at the edge of one of the great ice sheets during a cold phase, the scale would be difficult to understand. The ice would not look like a single perfectly smooth white surface. It would have ridges, shallow valleys, pressure cracks, blue shadows, frozen streams, wind-blown snow, and distant mountains emerging from its margins. Beneath the ice, the weight of thousands of meters of frozen water would press against the land. The glacier would move, but so slowly that a person standing there might never notice the motion. Yet, over centuries, that slow movement could grind rock into sediment, carve valleys, push enormous boulders across landscapes, and change the shape of entire regions. Glaciers behave almost like rivers made of stone and ice, flowing under their own weight. movement is one of the great reminders that apparent stillness can conceal enormous change. A mountain may seem permanent, but ice can reshape it. A valley may look ancient and untouched, yet its form may have been created by ice that moved through it tens of thousands of years ago. Even today, the curved valleys, lakes, ridges, and scattered boulders found across many parts of the world are quiet evidence of this ancient movement. Beyond the glaciers lay some of the most remarkable ecosystems of the Ice Age. In parts of Eurasia, a vast cold grassland stretched across the continent, sometimes described as the Mammoth Steppe. It was not identical everywhere, and it changed with climate and geography, but it could support enormous numbers of grazing animals. The combination of cold, dry conditions and productive grasses created a world in which large herbivores could travel over great distances. Imagine a broad valley at dawn. The sun has barely risen. Frost covers the grass, and the air is still enough that the breath of nearby animals appears as small clouds. Reindeer move along a distant slope. A group of horses crosses the plain, their hooves striking hard ground. Farther away, mammoths gather near a shallow depression where wind has cleared some snow from the vegetation. The landscape seems almost empty because there are no buildings or trees blocking the view. But every direction contains movement. Small mammals occupy burrows beneath the surface. Birds travel between seasonal habitats. Predators follow herds from a distance. Insects emerge during brief warm periods. Beneath everything, roots and soil preserve the memory of earlier seasons. The woolly mammoth has become the symbol of this world, and for good reason. Mammoths were extraordinary animals, members of the elephant family that evolved into forms adapted to cold environments. Their thick fur helped protect them from low temperatures, while layers of fat provided insulation and energy reserves. Their ears were relatively small compared with those of warmer climate elephants, reducing heat loss. Their long tusks could be used for digging through snow, moving vegetation, interacting with other mammoths, and defense. A mammoth was not simply an elephant covered in hair. It was the result of a long evolutionary history shaped by changing environments. Some mammoth species lived in different climates and regions, and the famous woolly mammoth occupied large areas of northern Eurasia and North America. Populations survived in some places long after the major ice sheets had begun to retreat. The last mammoths were therefore not distant creatures from an unimaginably ancient era. Some were living on isolated Arctic islands at a time when human civilizations had already begun to build cities, monuments, and writing systems. Picture a mammoth family moving through an evening landscape. The adults walk with a steady, heavy rhythm, while younger animals remain within the protective center of the group. The oldest individuals may remember routes between feeding grounds, river crossings, and sheltered valleys. Snow lies in shallow waves across the plain. The wind is carrying a faint smell of vegetation from somewhere ahead. The herd stops near a patch of exposed grass. Tusks push through snow. Trunks search beneath the surface. The animals are quiet, except for occasional low calls, the movement of feet, and the soft disturbance of snow. There is something deeply peaceful about the scene, even though survival is never guaranteed. The mammoths are simply living inside their world, following patterns that may have existed for generations. They do not know that one day their descendants will become fossils, that their tusks will be found in frozen soil, or that people thousands of years later will stand over their bones and try to reconstruct their lives. Woolly rhinoceroses lived in some of these same environments. Their bodies were compact and powerful, covered with thick hair that helped them endure the cold. Their horns were large, and their diet consisted largely of vegetation available in open environments. Giant deer, sometimes called the Irish elk, carried antlers that could reach extraordinary spans. Steppe bison formed herds across northern regions. Wild horses moved through grasslands, while reindeer could travel vast distances between seasonal feeding grounds. Musk oxen survived in some Arctic environments and remain alive today, providing a rare living connection to the Ice Age world. These animals were not simply a collection of large species. They formed an interconnected ecological system. Grazers influenced vegetation. Predators influenced herbivore behavior. Rivers and wetlands provided water. Seasonal temperature changes altered food availability. Snow depth could determine whether an animal could reach the plants beneath it. The same landscape could therefore be easy to cross one year and extremely difficult the next. One of the most important features of the Ice Age was its dryness. It is tempting to imagine a world covered entirely in deep snow, but many cold regions were surprisingly dry. Cold air holds less moisture, and enormous amounts of water were locked away in glaciers. Beyond the ice sheets, some landscapes could resemble cold deserts, with strong winds moving fine dust across open plains. This dust became important long after the Ice Age. Wind-blown sediments accumulated in layers and contributed to fertile soils in regions that would later support agriculture. The same winds that once carried dust across a mammoth steppe helped create landscapes where human societies would eventually develop. The distant past, therefore, reaches quietly into the present, even when we cannot see the connection. The sea was also different. Because so much water was stored as ice, global sea levels during the last glacial maximum were roughly 120 meters lower than today, though the exact amount varied through time and location. This meant that coastlines were dramatically displaced. Land that is now underwater was once exposed. Britain was connected to mainland Europe by a broad region known as Doggerland. Southeast Asia contained a much larger connected landmass, sometimes called Sundaland, linking areas that are now islands. Between Siberia and Alaska, the Bering Land Bridge formed part of a wider region known as Beringia. Animals and humans could move through these landscapes because the ocean had retreated from places where water now dominates the map. The modern coastline is therefore only one version of Earth's geography. During the Ice Age, the world had different borders, different routes, and different places where people could live. Doggerland is especially haunting because so much of it has disappeared beneath the North Sea. Imagine standing there thousands of years ago. You would not see the water stretching toward the horizon. Instead, you might see a broad lowland crossed by rivers and wetlands. Herds of deer and wild cattle would move through the landscape. Birds would gather near marshes. In warmer phases, forests could spread across parts of the region. Humans could camp beside rivers and travel across the plains. The land might feel ordinary to those who lived there, yet today it exists mainly as a submerged archaeological landscape. Storms, fishing activity, seabed mapping, sediment analysis, and archaeological discoveries have revealed pieces of its story. The North Sea contains a hidden geography beneath its waves, a reminder that landscapes can disappear without leaving a visible monument behind. The same is true of Beringia, which once connected northeastern Asia and Alaska. It was not simply a narrow bridge of land. During periods of low sea level, it could become a large region of tundra, steppe, rivers, lakes and productive habitats. Animals moved through it. Humans moved through it. Genetic evidence from living populations and ancient remains continues to help scientists understand the routes by which people spread across the world. The movement of humans into the Americas was not a single, simple event, and the details remain an active field of research. But the Ice Age geography created opportunities that no longer exist. A map of the modern world can therefore make ancient journeys seem impossible when, under Ice Age conditions, the geography was very different. As we move deeper into this world, it becomes clear that humans were not passive observers. Neanderthals had already lived across parts of Europe and Western Asia for hundreds of thousands of years. They were skilled hunters, tool makers, and survivors of changing climates. They used fire, constructed or occupied shelters, processed animal hides, and adapted to environments ranging from relatively open landscapes to colder regions. Modern humans later expanded across Eurasia and eventually into regions where earlier human populations had lived. The relationship between these groups was complex, involving periods of interaction, competition, movement, and interbreeding. Today, many people outside Africa carry small amounts of Neanderthal ancestry, a genetic trace of encounters that occurred long ago. Imagine a Neanderthal landscape at twilight. The temperature is dropping. A small group has returned to a sheltered place after a day of movement. A fire burns low. Tools lie beside carefully prepared materials. Animal hides provide warmth. Outside, the wind moves across the valley. The group does not have a written language or a map, yet they possess detailed knowledge of their surroundings. They know where water can be found, where animals are likely to pass, which rocks produce useful edges, where shelter can be reached before a storm, and how to maintain fire. Knowledge is stored not in books, but in memory, habit, observation, and teaching. A landscape can become a kind of library when every hill and river carries information. Modern humans eventually developed an extraordinary diversity of tools, clothing, shelters, ornaments, hunting strategies, and artistic traditions. In the archaeological record, these developments appear unevenly across regions and periods, reminding us that human history was never a straight line. Different communities experimented with different ways of living. Some hunted large animals. Others relied more heavily on fish, birds, plants. or smaller game. Some moved frequently. Others returned repeatedly to favored locations. Caves were used in some places, open-air camps in others. People adapted to local conditions rather than living according to one universal Ice Age lifestyle. At night, the human camp would have been a tiny warm point in a much larger darkness. Firelight would illuminate faces, hands, stone tools, hides, and food. Beyond the circle of light, the world would disappear. The soundscape would be completely different from ours. No distant traffic would hum continuously. No electrical equipment would vibrate in the background. There might be wind, the movement of animals, crackling firewood, voices, and long periods of silence. The sky would be extraordinarily dark. In clear weather, the stars would appear brighter because there were no city lights to compete with them. For a person lying beside that fire, the universe would have seemed enormous and immediate. Caves became especially important to our understanding of Ice Age humans because some cave environments preserve traces unusually well. In places such as Chauvet and Lascaux in France and Altamira in Spain, people created paintings and engravings of animals thousands of years ago. The exact meanings of these images are not always known. They may have been connected to storytelling, ritual, memory, identity, hunting, or forms of symbolic expression that we can only partly reconstruct. Yet their existence is remarkable. Someone entered a dark cave carrying a source of light, moved through an environment that could have felt completely separate from the outside world, and deliberately placed an image on stone. The pigment survived. The person did not. The community disappeared. The landscape changed. But the image remained. The animals depicted in cave art also reveal something about how people perceived their world. Horses, bison, aurochs, deer, ibex, woolly rhinoceroses, lions, bears, and other animals appear in different traditions. Sometimes the animals are shown with remarkable attention to anatomy and movement. A curved wall might become the body of a horse. A natural bulge in the rock might be incorporated into the shape of an animal. Flickering firelight could make painted forms seem to move. In darkness, the boundary between image and landscape may have felt different from the way it does under modern electric lighting. The cave was not simply a canvas. It was an environment. Outside the caves, glaciers continued to move. Mountain valleys were filled with ice, and enormous rivers of meltwater carried sediment away from their margins. As glaciers retreated, they left behind ridges, boulders, lakes, and broad valleys. In some regions, the weight of the ice had pressed the Earth's crust downward, and after the ice melted, the land slowly began to rise again. This process, called isostatic rebound, continues in parts of the northern hemisphere today. The landscape still responds to the weight of Ice Age ice long after the ice itself has vanished. There is a strange comfort in considering these timescales. A human lifetime is brief compared with the movement of glaciers, yet human lives are full of change. The Ice Age offers a different perspective. It shows that enormous transformations can occur without a single dramatic moment. A glacier retreats a little each summer. A forest spreads into an abandoned grassland. A river changes course. A shoreline moves inland. A species becomes rarer. A small population survives in an isolated refuge. Hundreds of generations pass, and eventually the world is different. The transformation is gradual enough to be almost invisible, yet its final result can be profound. The Ice Age also reveals how closely climate and life are connected. When temperatures changed, animals did not simply become warmer or colder. Their habitats moved. A species adapted to open steppe might lose territory as forests expanded. Another species might follow vegetation northward. Some populations became isolated by mountains, rivers, or changing coastlines. Genetic diversity could decline when populations became small. Humans, with their tools and social flexibility, could sometimes move more readily than other species, but they were also vulnerable to sudden changes in resources. The end of the Ice Age therefore brought opportunities and challenges at the same time. Around the world, megafauna began to disappear at different times and for different reasons. The exact causes remain debated and varied by region. Climate change altered habitats, while human expansion and hunting likely contributed to declines in some populations. In some cases, disease, ecological change, or combinations of factors may have mattered. It is important not to imagine one universal explanation. The Ice Age extinction story was complex. Some large animals disappeared near the end of the Pleistocene, while others survived. Reindeer remain. Musk oxen remain. Horses remain. Bison remain in altered forms. Elephants remain in warmer regions. The boundary between the Ice Age and the modern world was therefore not a clean disappearance of giants. It was a long reshaping of ecosystems. As the climate warmed, glaciers retreated. Forests returned to parts of Europe and North America. Tundra and steppe shifted northward. Rivers carried increasing amounts of meltwater. Lakes expanded and drained. Sea levels rose as ice sheets lost mass. Over thousands of years, landscapes that had been exposed during the low sea levels were gradually submerged. People living near those coastlines watched familiar land disappear, generation by generation. A hunting ground might become a marsh, then an estuary, then open sea. A valley could become a bay. A route that had connected communities could become impossible to cross on foot. The geography of human life was rewritten by water. One of the most remarkable examples of this changing world is the survival of mammoths on islands. On mainland Eurasia and North America, mammoth populations declined and disappeared at different times. Yet, isolated groups survived on Rangel Island until roughly 4,000 years ago. By then, humans in other parts of the world were already building complex societies. Ancient Egypt had entered its historical era. Stonehenge was being constructed and modified. Bronze Age communities existed across Eurasia. The mammoth was therefore not only a creature of a distant prehistoric wilderness. Its final survivors lived while recognizable human history was already underway. Think of that strange overlap. Somewhere in the Arctic, a small group of mammoths walks across a cold island. Their ancestors once occupied enormous portions of the northern hemisphere. Now the population is isolated. The mainland world has changed. The climate is warmer. Humans have settled in many regions, yet the mammoths continue, following the same basic rhythms of feeding, reproduction, and movement. Nothing in their daily lives announces that they are near the end of their lineage. Extinction rarely arrives with a clear final chapter. It is usually a gradual narrowing of possibilities until one day there are no more births, no more tracks, no more calls, and no more movement across the landscape. The Arctic preserves some of the most intimate evidence of this vanished world. Frozen ground can protect bones, teeth, tusks, hair, and even fragments of soft tissue. Ancient DNA can sometimes be recovered from remains or sediments. Scientists can examine isotopes in teeth to reconstruct diets and movements. Pollen and plant remains reveal what grew nearby. The frozen soil becomes a natural archive. It is as if the landscape itself has has been holding its breath for thousands of years, waiting for modern science to uncover small pieces of information. Ice cores provide another kind of archive. Deep beneath Greenland and Antarctica, layers of snowfall have accumulated over immense periods. As snow compresses into ice, tiny bubbles of ancient atmosphere can become trapped inside. Scientists can analyze these bubbles to learn about past concentrations of greenhouse gases. Dust, volcanic particles, chemical signals, and other traces can also reveal changes in the atmosphere and environment. In this way, the Ice Age is not merely reconstructed from fossils and rocks. It is recorded inside the ice itself, layer after layer, like a slow diary written by snowfall. The more we learn, the less the Ice Age resembles a simple story of cold. It becomes a story of interconnected systems. Ice influences sea level. Sea level changes coastlines. Coastlines influence ecosystems. Ecosystems influence animal movement. Animal movement influences human hunting strategies. Climate influences vegetation. Vegetation influences herbivores. Herbivores influence predators. Humans alter their technology in response. Every part of the system is connected, and a change in one place can eventually be reflected far away. Now imagine the world at the height of the last glacial maximum. The northern hemisphere is colder than today. Massive ice sheets dominate the landscape. The air is dry and often windy. The sea is lower. The continents appear larger because shallow seas have retreated. In the southern hemisphere, glaciers occupy mountain regions, and Antarctica is surrounded by expanded sea ice. Yet, beneath the global pattern, local worlds vary enormously. Some regions are frozen. Others are dry grasslands. Some valleys are sheltered and relatively mild. Some coasts remain productive. Life finds possibilities wherever climate allows. In Africa, the story is different from the frozen landscapes of northern Europe. Human populations lived through changing climates, and the Sahara itself experienced dramatic shifts between arid desert and greener phases. Rivers and lakes expanded during wetter periods, creating corridors for plants, animals, and humans. The Ice Age was therefore a global climatic story, not simply a European story about mammoths. Across continents, people and ecosystems responded to changes in rainfall, temperature, vegetation, and water availability. The planet was connected through atmosphere and ocean, even though no human understood the global system. In Asia, enormous regions of steppe and mountain landscape created routes for animals and humans. In North America, mammoths, mastodons, giant ground sloths, bison, camels, horses, and other large animals inhabited varied ecosystems. Some species that are associated with the modern world were already present in forms that looked different. South America contained its own remarkable megafauna, including giant ground sloths and enormous armored mammals. Australia had its own giant animals, such as giant marsupials and enormous birds. Each continent had its own version of the Ice Age world. The giant ground sloths of the Americas were especially extraordinary. Some species reached several meters in length and possessed powerful limbs and large claws. They belonged to a diverse group of animals that lived across different environments. Their remains show that the past was filled with forms of life that have no exact modern equivalent. The same can be said of giant armadillo relatives, enormous birds, and other extinct species. When we imagine prehistoric life, it is easy to focus on famous animals, but the deeper story is one of biodiversity. The Ice Age world contained many species that have disappeared completely. There were also predators whose names have become familiar through fossils and popular culture. Cave lions ranged across parts of Eurasia. Dire wolves lived in North America. Short-faced bears could reach extraordinary sizes. Saber-toothed cats occupied ecosystems where large herbivores were abundant. These predators were not monsters in a fantasy landscape. They were animals adapted to specific ecological conditions. Their bodies, teeth, and hunting strategies were shaped by the prey available to them. Their existence depended on the same web of life that supported mammoths and bison. Picture a snowy evening in a sheltered valley. A cave lion moves along the edge of a herd, keeping its distance. The herbivores are aware of the predator, but continue feeding. The lion waits. There is no dramatic chase. In the Ice Age, energy was precious. A failed hunt could mean days of wasted effort. Patience mattered. Predators watched for weakness, separation, injury, or confusion. Herd animals watched for movement. The entire landscape was filled with quiet calculations that did not require language. The same patience would have been familiar to human hunters. Hunting large animals required knowledge of behavior, terrain, weather, and cooperation. Archaeological evidence suggests that humans used many strategies, from direct pursuit to intercepting animals at natural barriers and exploiting seasonal concentrations. But hunting was only one part of survival. People gathered plants, collected eggs, fished, trapped small animals, scavenged when possible, and used every part of resources they obtained. Animal bones show cutting and processing marks. Hides became clothing and shelter materials. Bones and antler became tools. Nothing useful was easily wasted. The clothing of Ice Age people was itself an extraordinary technology. In cold environments, survival depended on controlling heat loss. Carefully prepared hides could become layered garments, footwear, blankets, and shelter coverings. Bone needles demonstrate that people could sew fitted clothing. Threads made from plant or animal fibers could connect pieces. A well-made garment could make the difference between being able to travel and being forced to remain sheltered. The stereotype of prehistoric humans wearing simple animal skins misses the complexity of this technology. Shelters varied according to environment and season. Some people used caves and rock shelters. Others built structures from wood, bone, hides, and other materials. Mammoth bones were used at certain sites to construct or reinforce dwellings, especially where other building materials were scarce. Imagine such a shelter from the outside, low against the wind, partially covered, with smoke drifting from a small opening. Inside, the space would be organized around fire, sleeping areas, tools, food, and materials. The architecture might seem simple compared with a modern house, but it represented a sophisticated response to climate and mobility. The night sky above such a shelter would have been extraordinary. Without artificial light, the Milky Way would have appeared as a broad, luminous band. The same constellations would have risen and set, though the precise position of the stars changes slowly over thousands of years because of Earth's movement through space and the gradual wobble of its axis. The people inside the shelter did not need to understand astrophysics to experience the sky. It was simply there, enormous and constant, providing light, orientation, and perhaps a source of stories and meaning. The Ice Age, therefore, belongs not only to geology and biology, but also to the beginning of human symbolic life. Archaeological evidence for ornaments, pigments, carvings, burials, and art shows that people were doing more than simply obtaining calories and staying warm. They were creating meaning. They decorated objects. They marked bodies. They painted walls. They may have told stories around fires. We cannot recover those stories directly, but we can see that symbolic behavior was part of human life tens of thousands of years ago. As you imagine the ancient night, it can be useful to let the details become softer. The fire is small. The cave walls are dark beyond the glow. Outside, snow moves across the entrance. The people inside are resting after the day's work. Somewhere beyond the shelter, a mammoth herd is moving through the darkness. A river flows beneath thin ice. The stars remain above everything. The entire scene is quiet enough that you can imagine hearing the wind pass over the open ground. Time moves differently here. One night becomes a season. A season becomes a lifetime. A lifetime becomes a family line. Children grow into adults and learn the roots their parents knew. The landscape changes slightly. Perhaps a glacier has moved farther back. Perhaps a forest has begun to expand. Perhaps a familiar herd is becoming less common. People adapt without seeing the full pattern. This is how much of environmental change is experienced, not as a dramatic transformation, but as a gradual adjustment to what counts as normal. The end of the Ice Age, therefore, was not a single morning when the world suddenly became warm. It was a long transition. Around 12,000 years ago, climate conditions changed rapidly compared with many earlier periods, although the exact timing and character varied by region. The northern hemisphere warmed, glaciers retreated, and ecosystems shifted. There were still significant cold episodes, including the Younger Dryas, a return to colder conditions near the end of the Pleistocene. The climate story was therefore more complicated than a simple straight line from cold to warm. During these changes, humans increasingly developed new relationships with plants and animals. In several parts of the world, communities began to experiment with more settled ways of living, plant cultivation, and animal management. Agriculture did not appear everywhere at once, and it was not simply caused by one climate event. But the Holocene world offered conditions that eventually supported increasingly permanent settlements and larger populations. The landscape that emerged from the Ice Age became the stage for villages, farms, cities, states, and civilizations. It is strange to think that the foundations of the modern world were laid partly in the retreat of glaciers. As ice disappeared, new habitats opened. Rivers settled into new courses. Forests expanded. Sea levels rose. Humans adapted to changing resources and gradually altered their relationship with the landscape. The enormous world of mammoths became a world of farmers, herders, fishermen, builders, and eventually urban societies. The transition took thousands of years, but from the perspective of geological time, it was remarkably quick. Yet the mammoths never knew any of this. The final animals continued to live according to the rhythms of their own environment. They fed, moved, rested, reproduced, and protected their young. Their extinction was not a historical event for them. There was no final announcement. There was only the gradual narrowing of their world. The same is true for many extinct species. A species does not usually disappear because every individual dies at once. It becomes less common. Populations become isolated. Reproduction becomes harder. Genetic diversity may fall. Habitats change. And eventually, there are no survivors. This is one of the most haunting aspects of the Ice Age. The world did not end. It simply changed. The grasslands did not vanish overnight. Forests moved into them. Rivers continued to flow. New plants grew. Other animals expanded their ranges. Humans survived. The planet remained alive. Only the particular combination of species and landscapes that defined the Ice Age became rare and then disappeared. If we could walk across an Ice Age plain today, we might recognize the basic shapes of some landscapes, but not their scale or inhabitants. There might be a mountain we know, but its lower slopes would be covered in ice. There might be a river, but its course would be different. There might be a coastline, but the sea would be far away. There might be a forest, but it would not be where we expect it. And there would be animals whose presence would make the world feel almost like another planet. Perhaps the most useful way to imagine the Ice Age is to think of it as a moving mosaic. Cold and warm zones shifted. Animals followed vegetation. Humans followed animals and water. Glaciers advanced and retreated. Rivers cut new paths. Coastlines rose and fell. The mosaic was never fixed. Every generation inherited a slightly different Earth from the one its grandparents knew. Tonight, as the modern world becomes quieter, imagine one of those generations waking before sunrise. The fire has burned down to embers. The air inside the shelter is cold. Outside, the horizon is still dark. Slowly, the first light touches the snow on distant hills. A mammoth herd is visible as dark shapes far away. The people prepare to begin another day. They do not know the year. They do not know the age of the earth. They do not know that their world will eventually become the subject of museums, books, satellite maps, DNA studies, and documentaries. They simply know the landscape around them. Perhaps someone checks the fire. Someone prepares clothing. Someone examines a tool. Someone looks toward the direction where the animals are expected to pass. The day begins. The world is enormous, and yet their lives are connected to a small number of familiar places. A river bend, a sheltered valley, a hunting ground, a cave, a ridge from which distant movement can be seen. Knowledge is local, but it is deep. This local knowledge is one reason the Ice Age should not be imagined as a world of helpless people. Humans were adaptable. They survived in Arctic environments, crossed open grasslands, occupied mountain valleys, and traveled along coastlines. They developed technologies appropriate to their circumstances. Their survival depended on cooperation, and cooperation itself may have been one of the most important human adaptations. A single person can do only so much in a harsh environment. A group can share food, protect children, maintain fire, process hides, make tools, and care for injured members. There is also evidence that humans sometimes cared for individuals who could not easily survive alone. Healed injuries in ancient skeletons suggest that people survived serious trauma. Such survival would often have required assistance from others. In this sense, the Ice Age is not only a story of predators and survival of the strongest. It is also a story of cooperation, care, teaching, and social bonds. The same social world may have helped humans transmit knowledge across generations. A child did not need to discover every useful plant or hunting route independently. They could learn from older members of the community. A landscape that had been studied for generations could become familiar in extraordinary detail. This is one reason ancient people could live successfully in environments that appear extremely difficult to modern observers. The Ice Age also changed the shape of the continents in ways that influenced migration. When sea levels fell, land bridges appeared. When glaciers melted, those routes disappeared. Human populations that had once been connected could become isolated. Genetic differences could accumulate. Some populations moved into new regions and adapted to new climates. Others remained in refuges where conditions were more stable. Over long periods, these movements contributed to the complex distribution of human populations around the world. The story of the Americas is especially connected to Ice Age geography. People eventually spread across enormous distances, adapting to environments from Arctic tundra to temperate forests, grasslands, deserts, and tropical regions. The exact timing and pathways of these migrations continue to be studied, and new archaeological and genetic evidence can change our understanding. But the broader point is clear. The Ice Age created a planet on which human movement was possible across landscapes that no longer exist. In the north, Beringia connected worlds that today are separated by the Bering Strait. Imagine crossing that region in an ancient cold season. The horizon would be broad and treeless in many places. Herds could move across the landscape. Rivers and wetlands would provide seasonal resources. The distance between Asia and North America would not feel like an ocean crossing because the ocean itself was farther away. People could travel gradually, following familiar routes and adapting to the land as they moved. The disappearance of Beringia was therefore not merely a geographic event. As sea levels rose, the landscape was gradually flooded. Lowlands became islands. Rivers became bays. Routes disappeared. Communities that had once been connected found themselves separated by water. Today, the Bering Strait seems like a natural boundary between continents. But during parts of the Ice Age, it was part of a much larger terrestrial environment. The same transformation happened in Southeast Asia. During low sea levels, many islands were connected into larger land masses. Rivers flowed across areas that are now seabed. Animals could move across routes that have since been submerged. Human populations occupied these landscapes, leaving traces that are sometimes difficult to find because they now lie beneath the sea. Underwater archaeology is gradually revealing more about these lost worlds, but much remains hidden. There is something deeply mysterious about a landscape that cannot be visited simply by walking across it. Doggerland, Beringia, Sunderland, and other Ice Age regions are real places, but they survive mostly through indirect evidence. Scientists reconstruct them from sediments, fossils, pollen, ancient DNA, seabed mapping, and models of past sea levels. We are looking backward through layers of evidence, trying to see a world that no longer has a visible surface. The Ice Age is therefore a kind of planetary archaeology. The evidence is scattered. A mammoth tusk here, a stone tool there, a layer of pollen beneath a modern field. a buried river channel under the sea, a cave painting on a wall, a bubble of ancient air trapped in ice. Each piece is small, but together they form a picture of a world that once covered much of the planet. And the picture continues to change as new evidence appears. Ancient DNA can reveal relationships between populations that bones alone cannot show. Sediment cores can reveal changes in vegetation and climate. High-resolution maps can reveal submerged landscapes. New dating techniques can refine the ages of archaeological sites. The Ice Age is not a closed story. Scientists are still discovering it. As we drift through this ancient world, perhaps the most striking feeling is not fear, but scale. The Ice Age lasted so long that thousands of human generations lived through parts of it. Mammoth populations existed across vast regions. Glaciers repeatedly expanded and retreated. Coastlines moved by enormous distances. Yet, each individual life was still intimate. Someone still woke beside a fire. Someone still carried a child. Someone still searched for food. Someone still laughed. Someone still watched the stars. The past is often presented through its largest objects, but history is made of small moments. A hand placing a stone tool beside a fire, a person sewing a piece of hide, a child learning which plants can be eaten, a group waiting quietly for animals to approach, someone drawing an animal on a cave wall. These moments are rarely preserved directly, but the objects they left behind allow us to imagine them. Imagine now that the wind has become softer. The sky is clear. The stars are bright. The mammoth herd has settled somewhere beyond the ridge. The fire is warm enough. The cold outside is no longer threatening because the shelter is secure. The ancient night stretches outward in every direction. There are no deadlines, no messages, no traffic, no alarms. There is only the slow rhythm of breathing and the distant movement of the natural world. This is perhaps why the Ice Age can become such a peaceful place to imagine. Although life was difficult, the landscape itself moved at a slower visual rhythm. Glaciers changed over centuries. Herds traveled gradually. Seasons returned. Rivers continued. The stars rose every night. The world was harsh, but it was also spacious. There was room between one sound and the next. Let the modern world remain far away for a little longer. Imagine the pale horizon before sunrise. Frost covers the ground. The mammoths begin to move again. Their footprints form a line across the snow. Behind them, the sky slowly changes color. A distant glacier catches the first light. The valley below remains blue and shadowed. Somewhere in the distance, water moves beneath ice. The animals do not know they are living in a vanished world. For them, it is simply home. The grass is real. The cold is real. The river is real. The herd is real. The season is real. Their world does not need to be named. It simply exists. And perhaps that is the quietest lesson of the Ice Age. Every world feels permanent while we are inside it. Coastlines seem permanent. Forests seem permanent. Cities seem permanent. Even species can feel permanent because they exist across many generations. But Earth is always changing. Ice advances and retreats. Rivers move. Mountains erode. Oceans rise and fall. Life adapts. Nothing remains exactly as it is. The Ice Age makes that truth visible because its changes were so immense. It reminds us that the planet we know is only one moment in a much longer story. Before our familiar landscapes, there were glaciers and mammoths. Before those landscapes, there were different climates and ecosystems. And far beyond the Ice Age, Earth has passed through worlds that would seem even stranger to us. For tonight, though, we can stay in this one. We can remain beside the ancient fire, beneath the stars, while the cold wind moves across the grassland. We can listen to the distant footsteps of animals that disappeared thousands of years ago. We can watch the glacier beneath the moon. We can imagine the hidden rivers of Doggerland and the wide plains of Beringia. We can picture people moving slowly through a world they knew intimately, carrying fire and tools, following the seasons. Eventually, the night will become morning. The herd will move. The fire will be rebuilt. The sun will rise above the distant ice. Another day will begin. And somewhere, without anyone noticing, the climate will continue its slow movement. A few grains of snow will melt. A little ice will retreat. A plant will grow. An animal will follow it. A human group will move toward water. The world will change by almost nothing today, and then by almost nothing tomorrow. Thousands of years later, those tiny changes will have become enormous. The glacier will be gone. The sea will cover the old plain. The mammoths will be fossils. The forests will stand where grasslands once stretched. Humans will build villages and cities. The stars will remain overhead, almost indifferent to the transformation below. Yet the ancient world will still be present in fragments, in a frozen tusk, in a cave painting, in a buried river, in a layer of dust, in in an ice core, in the genes of living animals, in the shape of a valley, in the soil beneath a field. The Ice Age will remain written into the earth. And as you let your thoughts become quieter, imagine that you are looking across the old landscape one final time. The glacier is distant. The mammoths are silhouettes. The grass moves gently in the wind. A river reflects the moon. The human fire is a small orange glow far away. Above everything is a dark sky filled with stars. There is no need to hurry away from this world. It took millions of years to become what it was, thousands of years to change, and countless generations to pass through it. You can simply remain there for a while, listening to the wind, watching the snow, and allowing the enormous scale of time to soften everything around you. The Ice Age was a world of giants, but its deepest story is about change. The giants came, lived, adapted, migrated, and eventually disappeared. The ice advanced and retreated. The oceans withdrew and returned. Humans entered new landscapes and learned to live within them. Nothing stayed exactly the same, yet life continued. Tonight, beneath the modern sky, the ancient landscape can return in imagination. The mammoths can walk once more. The glaciers can glow beneath the stars. The lost plains can stretch beneath the moon. The old rivers can flow again through lands that now lie beneath the sea. And for a little while, the distance between the present and the deep past can become very small. Then, slowly, let the scene become quieter. The mammoths disappear into the darkness. The wind moves over the grass. Snow settles on the ground. The glacier remains still beneath the stars. The fire burns low. The ancient world rests. And somewhere beyond the horizon, the earth continues turning, carrying the memory of ice through valleys, oceans, forests, and human history. The world has changed, but the story has not ended. It simply continues quietly, patiently, beneath our feet and above our heads, as it always has. The frozen world becomes even more interesting when we look beyond the famous mammoths and glaciers and notice the subtle places where life survived. Not every part of the Ice Age was equally cold. Mountains created sheltered valleys. Coastlines offered access to marine resources. Rivers remained productive even when surrounding land was frozen. Southern-facing slopes could receive more sunlight. Springs could remain open, while nearby ponds were sealed by ice. These small differences created refuges, places where plants, animals, and people could persist, while conditions changed around them. A refuge might be only a valley, a coastal strip, or a region protected by geography. But over generations, it could become a vital center of survival. When the climate shifted again, populations could expand outward from these refuges, recolonizing landscapes that had once been too cold or too dry. In this way, the Ice Age was not merely a cycle of disappearance and return. It was also a story of persistence, with life waiting quietly in the places where the environment still allowed it. Think about a forest at the edge of a colder zone. The trees are shorter than modern forests, shaped by wind and frost. Snow rests between the branches. Underneath, small animals move through tunnels in the vegetation. A stream remains partially open because water continues to flow beneath a thin layer of ice. Birds arrive at different times of the year. A herd of deer passes through the trees and disappears into the open country beyond them. To a modern observer, the forest might seem bleak, but it is full of relationships. Trees provide shelter. Plants provide food. Herbivores move between forest and grassland. Predators follow them. Humans learn where the animals travel. The boundaries between ecosystems are never perfectly sharp. They blend into one another, creating transitional zones where many species can meet. The same gradual blending happened as the Ice Age ended. Forests did not simply appear where glaciers had been. First came pioneer plants, grasses, shrubs, and species capable of surviving exposed conditions. Soil developed. Moisture changed. Other plants followed. Over centuries and millennia, communities changed. Trees spread into suitable areas. Animals followed their preferred habitats. Human groups adjusted their routes and resources. If you had watched the process every day, you would barely notice it. But if you could compare the landscape across thousands of years, the difference would be extraordinary. A barren glacial margin could become a grassland, then a woodland, then a landscape filled with farms and settlements. There is something almost cinematic about imagining that transformation in reverse. Begin with a modern forest at night. The trees are tall, the ground is covered with leaves, and a river moves quietly through the darkness. Then slowly remove the trees. The landscape opens. The river becomes wider and colder. Snow begins to cover the ground. The horizon expands. The temperature falls. The grass becomes shorter. Far in the distance, ice begins to appear on the mountains. Continue moving backward through time, and the world becomes colder still. The forest retreats. The glacier advances. The sea falls away from the coastline. The landscape becomes the Ice Age world. Now imagine reversing the journey. The ice retreats. Meltwater streams become larger. Plants colonize exposed ground. Grass spreads across the plains. Herds follow. Forests begin to appear. The coastline moves inland. The sea covers ancient lowlands. Human communities adapt. Eventually, the world becomes warmer and more familiar. The transformation is slow enough to feel almost peaceful, yet it completely changes the geography of life. The animals themselves were constantly adapting to these shifting boundaries. Reindeer could exploit tundra and open woodland. Bison preferred productive grasslands. Horses could travel across open country. Mammoths grazed where vegetation allowed. Predators followed concentrations of prey. Small mammals occupied environments that could change over much smaller distances. Every species had a preferred range, but those ranges were not fixed. They moved with climate. Migration, therefore, became one of the central rhythms of Ice Age life. Some animals traveled seasonally between feeding grounds. Others expanded or contracted their ranges over much longer periods. Humans also moved, sometimes following herds, sometimes following rivers and coastlines, sometimes responding to the availability of plants and other resources. A world without roads could still be highly connected. The pathways were not drawn on maps. They were remembered through landscapes. A mountain pass, a river crossing, a sheltered valley, a place where animals gathered in autumn, a cave that offered protection during storms. These features formed an invisible network. Imagine walking one of those ancient routes. Your feet move across hard ground, sometimes covered by frost. Ahead, a ridge rises gently. Beyond it is a valley. You already know there is water there because someone told you, or because you traveled this way before. The journey is quiet. There is no need to speak constantly. The landscape itself provides information. Animal tracks cross the ground. Birds gather near a wetland. A broken branch suggests recent movement. The position of the sun helps with direction. At night, the stars provide another kind of orientation. The environment is not empty. It is full of signals. The Ice Age also contained enormous amounts of darkness. During winter at high latitudes, the sun could remain below the horizon for long periods. Even at lower latitudes, winter nights were longer and cold conditions limited activity. Fire, therefore, became more than a source of warmth. It was light, cooking, protection, and a gathering point. Around fire, people could extend the useful hours of the day. They could work on tools, prepare hides, process food, and socialize. The glow of a fire in a dark shelter would have created a tiny artificial world, much as a modern lamp creates a small circle of visibility, but with far greater importance. Firelight also changed perception. A cave wall illuminated by flame does not look like a wall under electric light. Shadows move. The surface seems to breathe. Natural contours can resemble animals. Painted forms can appear to shift. The flickering light may have been part of the experience of cave art. We cannot know exactly how people understood these spaces, but we can imagine that darkness and light were deeply intertwined with the symbolic landscapes they created. The art itself is a reminder that Ice Age humans were capable of extraordinary observation. Some animal figures capture the curve of a back, the angle of a head, the tension of a leg, or the shape of a horn with surprising precision. These were not simply decorative marks. They show that people watched animals carefully. They knew how they moved. They recognized species. They understood the visual patterns of their environment. A person who could follow a herd across a landscape needed to notice details that modern observers might overlook. The same observational skill appears in tools. Stone flakes reveal deliberate choices about how rock was struck. Bone points show knowledge of materials. Needles reveal fine craftsmanship. Antler tools demonstrate that people understood how to shape organic materials. Clothing and shelter required planning. All of these technologies reflect accumulated knowledge. The Ice Age was not technologically static. Tools changed across time and regions, sometimes becoming more specialized and complex. As the climate warmed, these technologies helped humans exploit new environments. Fishing became increasingly important in some regions. Boats eventually allowed movement along coasts and across waterways. Nets, hooks, harpoons, and other tools expanded the range of resources people could use. The retreat of glaciers opened new valleys and coastlines. Humans moved into them, carrying knowledge from older environments and creating new traditions. The ocean itself was a major part of the Ice Age world. Lower sea levels exposed broad coastal plains, but marine environments remained important. People could collect shellfish, fish, hunt marine mammals, and travel along shorelines. Coastal archaeology is difficult because many ancient shorelines are now underwater. This means that some of the most important human landscapes of the late Ice Age may be hidden beneath modern seas. We see fragments of them when underwater sediments, submerged structures, or ancient tools are discovered. Imagine an ancient coastline under a sky filled with stars. The sea is dark and cold. A small fire burns near a sheltered beach. People have gathered food from the shore. Beyond them, the land stretches into a low plain that will eventually disappear beneath rising water. They do not know that the coastline is temporary. To them, the beach is simply the edge of their world. Generations later, that same place may be beneath the sea. This idea of disappearing landscapes is one of the most powerful themes of the Ice Age. We often think of history as something that happened on land that still exists. But large portions of human history happened on landscapes that have since been flooded, eroded, buried, or transformed. The past is not always underneath our feet. Sometimes it is beneath the ocean. The changing sea also affected animals. Some species could cross exposed land bridges, while others became isolated as water returned. Islands formed. Populations became separated. In some cases, animals evolved differently in isolation. On Rangel Island, mammoths survived long after their mainland relatives disappeared. Isolation can protect a population temporarily, but it can also make it vulnerable to environmental changes and genetic problems. The final mammoths lived in a world that was already very different from the one their ancestors knew. Their range had shrunk enormously. Instead of crossing continents, the surviving populations occupied small, isolated regions. Their extinction, therefore, tells us something about the end of ecological space. A species can survive as long as enough suitable habitat remains connected. When the landscape fragments, survival becomes harder. The same principle applies to many modern species, which is one reason the Ice Age remains relevant. The past provides natural experiments in how climate and geography influence populations. By studying ancient changes, scientists can understand how species responded to warming and cooling before modern industrial activity. Ancient DNA, fossil distributions, pollen records, and sediment cores can reveal how ecosystems moved through time. The Ice Age also offers a perspective on the resilience of nature. After glaciers retreated, life returned to to newly exposed landscapes. Plants spread, animals followed. Rivers established new channels. Forests expanded. Lakes formed. Even areas scraped almost clean by ice could eventually support complex ecosystems. Recovery can take time, but life is remarkably persistent when conditions allow it. Yet, resilience does not mean that every species survives. Some lineages disappear permanently. The Ice Age extinction record is a reminder that ecological communities can change irreversibly. Once a species is gone, another may occupy its role, but the exact combination of behaviors, relationships, and adaptations is lost. The disappearance of a mammoth is not simply the loss of one large animal. It changes vegetation, nutrient movement, predator behavior, and the experience of the landscape. A mammoth herd would have influenced the environment through grazing and movement. Large herbivores knock down vegetation, disturb soil, transport seeds, and create pathways. Their disappearance could allow shrubs and trees to expand in some areas. The landscape therefore changes not only because climate changes, but because animals themselves are part of the environment. This is another reason the Ice Age world cannot be reduced to temperature. Climate created the broad conditions, but animals and plants actively shaped those conditions. Humans also became increasingly influential. The Earth was never simply a stage on which life performed. Life helped construct the stage. Consider a grassland maintained partly by grazing. Mammoths, bison, horses, and other herbivores consume young trees and grasses, disturb soil, and move nutrients. Their presence helps keep the landscape open. If the large herbivores disappear, vegetation may change. Trees can expand. Fire patterns may change. Smaller animals respond. Predators lose prey. A single extinction can therefore ripple outward. The Ice Age is filled with such ecological connections. It is a reminder that nature is not a collection of separate species, but a network. When the climate shifts, the network rearranges itself. Some connections break, others form. New ecosystems emerge. Now imagine a summer day near the end of the Ice Age. The temperature is warmer than it was generations earlier. Snow melts earlier. Plants appear sooner. A river runs faster with meltwater. The mammoths still move across the plain, but the vegetation is changing. Young trees are appearing in places where open grass once dominated. The herd follows the remaining productive areas. A few generations later, the forest has expanded further. the mammoths move again. The landscape is quietly closing around them. For the people living there, this might simply feel like a change in hunting conditions. They may notice that animals are harder to find in certain places. They may move their camps. They may develop new tools. They may fish more often. They may learn to exploit new plants. Adaptation happens through practical decisions, not through an awareness of climate science. This is how humans experienced environmental change for most of history. They did not measure global average temperature. They noticed when winters were longer, rivers froze differently, animals arrived earlier, plants grew in new places, or familiar resources became scarce. Knowledge accumulated locally. Over many generations, those observations became part of culture. The Ice Age, therefore, contains an ancient record of human flexibility. People survived by changing. They did not have to remain identical to their ancestors. Tools changed. Diets changed. Settlement patterns changed. Movement changed. Symbolic traditions changed. The ability to learn and adapt became one of the defining strengths of our species. As the Holocene began, some human communities became increasingly settled. The climate was generally more stable than the highly variable glacial world. Plants and animals could be managed more predictably in certain regions. Agriculture developed independently in several parts of the world over long periods. Domestication changed the relationship between humans and other species. Villages grew. Food storage became important. Population densities increased. Eventually, cities appeared. This does not mean the Ice Age simply ended and civilization began the next day. There was a long transition. For thousands of years, humans continued hunting, gathering, fishing, and moving, while other communities experimented with cultivation and settlement. Different lifestyles coexisted. The modern world emerged gradually from a mosaic of ancient strategies. The landscapes inherited by early farmers were partly shaped by the glaciers that had recently retreated. Fertile river valleys, less soils, lakes, and open plains were products of earlier climate and geology. The Ice Age had prepared the physical environment in ways that would later influence where humans could thrive. Even today, modern agriculture often occupies landscapes whose basic forms were created by glacial processes. The soil beneath crops may contain sediments deposited by ancient rivers or winds. The shape of a valley may reflect glacial erosion. A lake may may occupy a basin carved by ice. A road may follow a route established by geography long before humans existed. The past is built into the present. When we look at a mountain valley and see beauty, we may be looking at a glacial sculpture. When we stand beside a lake and see calm water, we may be looking into a basin created by ancient ice. When we walk across fertile soil, we may be walking on dust carried by ice age winds. The landscape is full of hidden history. Perhaps that is why the Ice Age can be such a soothing subject for sleep. It encourages the mind to slow down and expand. Instead of thinking about the immediate present, we can imagine time measured in thousands or millions of years. A glacier moves, a river flows, a herd travels, a forest grows, the stars rise. Nothing needs to happen quickly. Imagine lying inside an ancient shelter while snow falls outside. The fire is warm. The walls are rough stone. The air smells faintly of smoke and animal hide. Outside, the cold is intense, but inside there is safety. The night passes slowly. Someone nearby is sleeping. A child breathes quietly. The fire shifts and crackles. Beyond the shelter, the wind crosses the frozen plain. Far away, a mammoth raises its head. For a moment it listens. Then it returns to feeding. The herd is calm. The snow continues. Above them, the same stars that humans see today shine over the ancient world. Now imagine the glacier. It occupies the distant mountains. Moonlight touches its surface. Deep blue shadows appear in cracks and valleys. The glacier seems motionless. Yet beneath the surface, ice is moving. It flows so slowly that the eye cannot follow it. Over years, it advances or retreats by distances too small to notice in a single night. Over centuries, it can transform the land. This slow movement can become a metaphor for the entire Ice Age. Nothing is hurried, yet everything changes. The climate shifts by small amounts. The glaciers respond. Vegetation follows. Animals move. Humans adapt. After thousands of years, the world is completely different. The same is true of our own lives, although on a much smaller scale. Change often happens so gradually that we do not notice it until we look back. The Ice Age offers an immense version of that experience. A landscape can become another landscape without a single moment when the transformation feels complete. As the final glaciers retreat, the great cold world becomes fragmented. Ice survives in mountain ranges and high latitudes. Grasslands shrink or move northward, forests expand, sea levels rise, mammoths become rarer, human populations grow. The world begins to look more familiar, but the memory of the Ice Age remains. It survives in the names of places, in the shapes of landscapes, in fossils, in scientific records, and in stories. It survives in the genes of living species. It survives in the soil and the ice. It survives in the human imagination, where mammoths still walk beneath frozen skies. Perhaps one reason we are fascinated by mammoths is that they seem to represent a world that was larger than ours. Their bodies were enormous. Their herds could stretch across open plains. Their landscapes had fewer human structures and more visible horizons. They remind us of a time when wild animals dominated huge portions of the planet. Yet the Ice Age was also a human world. People lived there, loved there, struggled there, and dreamed there. They were not simply watching the megafauna. They were part of the ecosystem. They changed landscapes through fire, hunting, movement, and later domestication. The human story and the Ice Age story are inseparable. When you imagine the ancient fire again, remember that the people around it were not thinking about prehistory. They were living in the present of their own time. The future was uncertain. The past was remembered through parents and grandparents. The landscape was familiar. The stars were familiar. The cold was familiar. Their world was not strange to them. It is only strange to us because so much of it is gone. And that is perhaps the most beautiful part of traveling into the Ice Age through imagination. We do not need to recreate every detail perfectly. We can simply allow the broad world to return. The open plains, the distant ice, the mammoths, the quiet rivers, the cold wind, the human fire, the dark sky. The details can remain soft around the edges. The night grows deeper. The ancient world becomes quieter. The mammoth herd settles beneath a pale sky. The glacier remains in the distance. Snow moves gently across the ground. The fire continues to glow. There is no need to solve the mystery of why the Ice Age existed or why it ended tonight. Those questions can remain open. The important thing is simply to remember that Earth has passed through many worlds, and the one we live in now is only one chapter. Long before our cities, glaciers covered continents. Long before our roads, animals crossed open plains. Long before our maps, coastlines shifted. Long before our calendars, humans watched the same stars. And long after individual lives ended, the planet continued changing. The Ice Age teaches patience. Ice moves slowly. Rivers carve slowly. Forests spread slowly. Species change slowly. Yet slow processes can create enormous transformations. The world does not need to change quickly to become completely different. As you rest, imagine the earth turning beneath an ancient night sky. The northern continents are partly covered in ice. The southern landscapes are shaped by their own cycles. The oceans are lower. The continents are connected differently. The atmosphere carries the chemistry of another age. Across the plains, animals move. Inside shelters, humans sleep beside fire. The scene is peaceful because nothing is asking you to act. You are only observing. The wind passes. The snow falls. The river flows. The stars remain. And perhaps somewhere in the distance, a mammoth herd is still walking, one slow step after another, across a world that no longer exists. Let that image remain for a while. The herd moves toward the horizon. The adults are dark against the pale landscape. The calves stay close. Their footprints form a long trail behind them. A few birds cross the sky. The wind lifts loose snow and carries it across the plain. Behind the herd, the mountains remain. Above them, the stars remain. Beneath them, the ancient soil remains. Everything is quiet. Eventually, the herd disappears into the darkness. The glacier remains. The river remains. The fire remains. And the earth keeps turning.